Kentucky basketball has a plethora of shooters up and down their roster, but there's one in particular that could turn into an All-American type of player.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be discussing Jaxson Robinson. That's right, the transfer from BYU. I believe he could be an All-American type of player for the Kentucky Wildcats this season. I'm going to explain why, as well as take a look at Kentucky basketball's schedule. They are adding times to it. And as of today, the thing is officially done. So I want to take a look at the entire schedule, kind of get you guys up to speed as we are 1 month away from Kentucky's first exhibition game in October. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. If you are watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show. And if you are listening on podcast, I would also appreciate it if you subscribed there as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, you can create an account, and you can use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. I believe that Jaxson Robinson, the transfer guard from BYU, could be an All-American type of player for the Kentucky Wildcats this upcoming season. In case you don't know, Robinson spent 2 years with BYU, previously at Texas A&M and Arkansas, 2 years there with Mark Pope, and has now transferred over to be probably the star scorer of this team. As we get closer here to that October 23rd date, less than a month away, I have decided to start giving you guys player previews and have taken an idea for every single player on this roster. We started our preview series last week with Kobe Brea, and here we are now today with Jaxson Robinson. Would appreciate it if you guys in the comments below comment who you want me to talk about next. Could be Otega Owe, could be Andrew Carr, could be literally anybody. Who do you want to see me preview next? But we've got Robinson here today, a guy that I think could really be special for the Cats here statistically, and then as far as what you see on the court, I think he could develop into an NBA-type guard. He was almost one this past season, according to draft experts, and I think he really will be able to solidify himself as a draftee this upcoming season. Last year at BYU, sixth man of the year in the Big 12, solid piece for Mark Pope and company, 14.2 points per game, 2.5 rebounds, 1.3 assists, while shooting 42.6% from the floor and 35.5% from three. Those are not the most impressive statistics in the world. In fact, if you're comparing it to an All-American in college basketball, those statistics are several points and a large field goal percentage behind what you would expect from college basketball's best. So you may be saying, Lance, why is Jaxson Robinson here in contention to have such an honor? Well, I think there are a few reasons. First of all, I think it is Mark Pope's system. I think Mark Pope is going to put Jaxson Robinson in a position to, I think, statistically be better than he has been in seasons past. In fact, if you look at his three-point percentage, 35.4%, that was the best mark of his career so far. I think he's going to have the opportunity to improve upon it because of the development, because of the shooting around him. I think he's going to find himself in a lot better situations as far as catch and shoot opportunities, as far as spot up opportunities go. And I think he's going to be able to, with Kentucky and with the personnel that the Wildcats have, they're going to be able to shoot the lights out, and he's going to be able to be the recipient of a lot of transition shots, transition opportunities. You may say, Lance, what about at BYU? Why was he only shooting 35.5% at BYU? Well, you'll note he went from 32.6% at Arkansas to 34.3% in his first year at BYU, and he only got better his second year. So I think that Mark Pope's system really does help develop a player. I actually wrote a lengthy article over on my Substack earlier this summer about how Mark Pope has taken transfers and just automatically improved them in some category or all whenever they were able to step on the court for him. I think that Robinson, with a third year and with this specific group of personnel, is really going to be able to find his footing and improve on his three-point shot. I think you're going to see his volume as well probably go up just a hair, if not a little bit more. I think you're also going to see that points per game average get within that 17, 18, 19 points per game range. I think that if you had to pick right now a guy to lead Kentucky basketball in scoring, I think that Jaxson Robinson is probably the guy that you want to look to first. Now, Andrew Carr, Kobe Brea, different guys, Otega Owe, different guys on this roster may be able to lay claim to that at the end of the season. But Robinson, I think, has the biggest boom potential here on the team. It's also, I think, for his physical attributes. I think that at 6'7", Jaxson Robinson, 193 pounds. Jaxson Robinson, with his ability to handle the basketball as well as he does, he's going to be able to step into the SEC physically and make an impact on both ends of the floor. He averaged 0.8 steals per game last year. I would expect him to average over a steal per game this season. I think he is really going to be that solid defensively, creating havoc and then also giving other players opportunities in transition. I think you're going to see his assists go up. I think there's going to be a lot of attention possibly drawn to him because of his height. Now, Kentucky's got different guys up and down this roster that are wing-type players that can handle the ball, but Robinson, I think, stands above the rest as far as the most comfortable with the ball. Obviously, the most volume this past season at BYU, averaging almost 7 shots per game. He is going to be the front runner, and I think the physicality comes with that at 6'7", 200 pounds. So I think Robinson, because of the system that Mark Pope is going to run and also because of the physical attributes that he has as an NBA guard-type player, I think he's going to be able to step into a situation at Kentucky that strongly benefits him and I think will add to his development before he moves off to the NBA. This is going to be a special season, I think, for BYU transfer Jaxson Robinson. Let me know what you think in the comments below about Jaxson Robinson and what he could do for the Kentucky Wildcats this upcoming season. I think he could be an All-American type player. I really do think he can make that jump. All right, I want to talk here for a little while about Kentucky basketball and their schedule. The schedule has been set. Times and TV assignments for different games will be announced as we get closer to them, but every single game is in order here, and we are ready to rock. Before we dive into the various games on the schedule, I want to get your thoughts on all of them. I want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return over on FanDuel. That's America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats. You can look at the live play-by-play and so much more on the same page when you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You can actually go over right now. There's a really interesting game. The Chicago Bears are favored. That's right, they are favored. You heard me correctly, over the Los Angeles Rams this weekend. 2.5-point favorites over Matt Stafford and the Rams. I know the entire Los Angeles roster is on the injury report, but did we see what just happened against San Francisco? That's an interesting line I think you may want to go check out. You can head over to FanDuel.com. You can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is all over at FanDuel.com. It's America's #1 sports book. All right, continuing along here on the Monday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. I really appreciate you guys checking out the show today. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, I would also appreciate it if you subscribed there as well. And hey, if you've got any questions for this upcoming basketball season, we are getting so close. You can leave those in the comments below. At Locked On UK on Twitter is where you can find me as well. If you want to leave a message, if you want to tag me in a tweet, I'll do my best to answer it here on the show. We've been talking a lot here recently about recruiting, about the momentum that Mark Pope has, and of course, we'll be able to continue to keep tabs on what's going on the recruiting trail because it's really special. Caleb Wilson, Caden Lewis, Jasper Johnson, Malachi Marino could form a big 4 players in Kentucky's upcoming recruiting class. Could be a very strong 4-player class, possibly even 5, depending on what the Wildcats want to do. So let me know what you think in the comments below about just anything going on with Kentucky basketball. We'll address it. But as we get closer here to the start of the season, I want to start to kind of shift our focus to what's going to be happening here in just a few short weeks. So to anybody that may be joining back here as we get closer to basketball season, that's kind of trying to figure out, okay, what's Kentucky about? First of all, thank you so much for watching today. If you haven't subscribed, I would greatly appreciate it if you did. It's going to be a super fun season for the Cats. So we've talked about two players already in Kobe Brea, who I think is the best shooter in the country. I don't think a lot of people would disagree. And then Jaxson Robinson, somebody that I think could be an All-American type player for the Cats this upcoming season. I want to focus here on the schedule. And this may be the last time that we focus on the schedule as a whole before I give my official predictions before the season actually starts. So we'll focus on different portions. Obviously, the non-con is going to be huge. I think I want to reiterate what I've said about the SEC slate and kind of how I think this could end up starting for the Cats. I think they can get off to an incredibly hot start. But for today here, let's start at the top with the 2024-25 schedule. It's been set. I want to go through here. Let's talk about the non-con, then we'll talk about the conference slate in just a little bit. October 11th is where things start. Big Blue Madness tickets, actually, as of today, September 23rd, those have gone on sale. So if you want to go find those, I'm sure you can find those online, probably at ukathletics.com. You can find the newsletter there. But Big Blue Madness happening October 11th. I'm super curious to see how Kentucky approaches it this year with no Cal, with Mark Pope, with a new crop of players. I think it's going to be super entertaining. October 18th, you have your blue and white preseason event. And then just 5 days after that, you have your first exhibition game against Kentucky Wesleyan. Now, Kentucky Wesleyan is no slouch, but I think that their second exhibition opponent, Minnesota State, who is on October 29th, is going to be even more of a challenge. They went 35-3 last year in Division II basketball. They, with their personnel a season ago, they shot threes from all over the place. They did play with tempo. They were super fun to watch, but they lost some of those guys this upcoming season. So I think that the system will probably stay the same. We'll just be looking at a lot of new faces for Minnesota State that will probably be trying to do the same thing. How Kentucky approaches that and the dynamic between these two teams that want to go really fast is going to be interesting. I've already said this. I want to get out in front of it as quickly as I can. Kentucky defensively is probably going to be better than they were a season ago. I think that early on, when you look at things like KenPom, when you look at just overall statistics, I don't know if they're going to be ranked extremely highly unless they just show out, because they're going to be playing so many teams that last year ran tempo and relied heavily on the three-point shot. There's a lot of teams in this non-conference slate that will look to shoot from beyond the arc quickly. So I think that may sort of skew statistics because more often than not, those teams are going to be able to get some more points. Kentucky's going to play fast as well. It's going to give the opponent more possessions, et cetera, et cetera. We've talked about all of this last year, but you're going to see teams like Minnesota State. Maybe you see them score some more points than you expect. And I think part of that has to do with Kentucky working out the kinks and both these teams wanting to play very fast. You open up the season against Wright State on November 4th. Then you play Bucknell on November 9th. And then here you have it, November 12th, 9 p.m. on ESPN. This time was officially announced. You get Duke. The Blue Devils going to be one of the best teams in the entire country this upcoming season. I think easily a top 10, top 5, top team, with Cooper Flagg and just a plethora of five-star wings that they've got there. They are going to be an extremely tough out. They're going to be favored against Kentucky unless Flagg or somebody is hurt before they play the Wildcats. I think that Kentucky has the ability to win this game. I think it's going to be close. We'll obviously preview that once it gets there, but that's the biggest game of the slate early. Then you play Lipscomb on November 19th. Then you play Jackson State on November 22nd. And then you play November 26th against Western Kentucky. I think all of those teams are a part of the BBN Invitational, if I'm not mistaken. November 29th, you've got Georgia State. And then this game, the time for this game was actually announced earlier today at 9:30 on ESPN. It's kind of a late tip. On December 3rd, you are at Clemson for the SEC ACC Challenge, a team that lost a lot of pieces from their Elite Eight run just a season ago, but still very solid underneath Coach Brad Brownell. All right. And then you go right after that, 4 days later. And then you're playing in the battle For Seattle against the Gonzaga Bulldogs. You are traveling all the way across the country on December 7th to face off what should be a very, very good Zags team. Then you've got Colgate on December 11th. You've got a game against Louisville that should be super, super fun on December 14th. Then December 21st, you are on the road in Madison Square Garden, 5:30 p.m. on CBS, taking on Ohio State, who should be a top 25 team this year. We'll kind of monitor that, see where that goes. December 31st, 10 days after the Ohio State game, you've got Brown, and then you open things up for the SEC slate. We'll continue to break this down here in just a second. Before we do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. It has been super awesome for me throughout this Major League Baseball season to go and get tickets through Game Time, and of course, I loved using them last year for college football, and I'm going to use them again this season for some upcoming road games that I want to go see at different venues. It's going to be super, super fun. It is an incredible place to go. It's the only place you should go to find your tickets for not just sporting events, but also any kind of events near you. You can go to comedy events, theater, you can go to concerts. I've actually used it for a couple of concerts. Post Malone is going to be coming up here shortly for me, and I'm super excited about that. They've got all-in pricings, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. They will cover everything. If you find something elsewhere for the same price or less, you can take the guesswork out of buying your tickets over at Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. You can download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, wrapping up the Monday edition of Locked On Kentucky. So we're looking at Kentucky basketball's slate. We're looking at the non-conference slate that is pretty difficult. I mean, you got games there against Duke, Gonzaga, Clemson, Ohio State, Louisville. There are pieces of this that are incredibly tough, and I think that it's going to be a major test for Mark Pope and company early with their young squad. But if you listen to my show recently, I think Kentucky's going to start strong. Of course, we'll harp on all of those feelings as we get closer and closer to the season. But let's continue here with this conference slate to wrap things up today. January 4th, you've got Florida. January 7th, you're on the road at Georgia. January 11th, you're on the road again at Mississippi State. Then you return home for 2 home games, January 14th and January 18th against Texas A&M and Alabama. Really interesting start there with Florida, Georgia, Mississippi State, and A&M. Of course, any of those teams could beat Kentucky. But looking at their rosters compared to UK's and the fact that 2 of those games, arguably the 2 biggest, are at home with Florida and A&M, I would expect Kentucky to be competitive or win those. Also, we did an episode probably a month or so ago, questioning how good are these teams offensively going to be that are just infused with transfer portal talent. I think Kentucky is kind of an exception because statistically, all of their guys are really good at doing the thing that Mark Pope's system is going to try and get them to do. So I think on paper, Kentucky probably makes a better argument than almost anyone in the SEC for being offensively strong outside of your Alabama and maybe your Auburn and Tennessees of the world. Maybe, I don't even know if you include Tennessee in that. But Kentucky, I think, is going to have an advantage here early. Then you play Alabama, like I mentioned, on January 18th. And then you're on the road for 2 games in the state of Tennessee, January 25th and January 28th. At Vanderbilt and at Tennessee. February 1st, it's probably the biggest game of the year. You return home to play Arkansas in Rupp Arena. February 4th at Ole Miss. 2 home games, February 8th and February 11th against South Carolina and Tennessee. Then you're at Texas February 15th. And then you have an interesting close to the slate. So this is kind of what I wanted to talk about here for a second. You've got the beginning of the slate that I think it has its positives, absolutely. And then you have an interesting close. Vanderbilt at home, February 19th. You're at Alabama, February 22nd, which is going to be really tough. But look at the rest of the games here. At Oklahoma, February 26th. March 1st, you have Auburn at home, who you always beat in Rupp. March 4th, LSU at home. March 8th, at Missouri. to close the regular season before the SEC tournament, which is the 12th through the 16th of March. You have opportunities there late to really start to build things against what are projected to be teams that are worse than you and your conference. And I'm not saying LSU, Missouri, Auburn, Oklahoma. I'm not saying they're going to suck. I'm just saying right now on paper, I think Kentucky's better than all of those teams except for Alabama. So, given what we know about Mark Pope and his system and kind of how his teams have rolled, I think there's a great chance that they start hot and finish hot. I think that there's a really good chance of that happening, especially if Kentucky's able to improve on the defensive side of the ball. Protecting the rim may end up being the most crucial thing that Kentucky basketball does this season. We'll see how it goes. So that's your entire 2024-25 college basketball slate for the Kentucky Wildcats. Of course, we'll preview it in full later on in October. We'll give my full predictions, but we'll also touch on individual games as we get closer as well. So let me know what you think in the comments below. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, you can leave those in the YouTube comments below. You can hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.